Ah, okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to ACIM Fireside with One Feather and myself, Reverend Devin Devine. How you doing today? How are you doing, One Feather? How's it going?
Really good. It's those small increments. We make small steps, and but nonetheless, we have to trust that we are making progress because when you stop making progress, everything stops, and that can get weird. That can actually involve your next incarnation. So you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
keep putting one foot in front of the other.
I just realized the reason I was hesitating at the beginning was that I don't have your sound going through my system and recording right now as I'm doing my podcast. I was just about to say, I'm like, oh, I need to test this. And I realized you hit the live button. So
Oh,
I don't,
okay.
it's all good. I can always extract the audio. That's one thing also about this. I'm not used to this about talking over each other thing where it cuts each other off. I got to make sure I don't do that.
Yeah,
Welcome.
it's
I'm new to this world, everybody.
Yeah, Hangouts are pretty much designed for the least amount of effort, and that's a good thing. Although there are versions that can turn into very interesting adventures simply because you can have your own system and make it much more complicated. But complication is nothing.
Oh yeah.
It's nothing that we need to enter into now. But So, what are your thoughts on the last week of advancement here in the material world? Have there been any new themes come up or any new experiences that have kind of lodged themselves in your mind?
Well, I wouldn't really say that anything entirely new has occurred. It's kind of the same old, same old. But I am experiencing what I would say is this decision to have some sensation, I guess, of back pain, which I think of it more as I'm having transition, uh, misunderstanding of transition between frequencies. And I'm trying to put it into words. And I guess the only words to say is that it's kind of a back pain, residual chest pain thing. But it's like I have that opportunity to take that perspective of either seeing it physical or completely recognizing that this spiritual experience of it. That's something anyway that I have noticed in the past few days that has been different than usual. uh,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, especially the lower back pain, which is a
It's
lot.
upper. It's like
Oh,
in my. Oh, sorry, I'm cutting you off again. There we go. Sorry.
not a problem, but if it's in the upper regions, it's more likely muscle pain rather than anything, you know, more complex and therefore more scary. So, uh, and I think that that happens at different stages in life because I went through a period when I was in my mid 30s where I had that show up and it would pop up and down for about 2 or 3 years and then it just vanished. And then again in my 60s, my early 60s, it came around again. And I haven't been noticing that for quite a while now. So it really is a thing where, if you're just looking at it and not allowing it to become something that you're in resistance to, then it resolves itself generally in a natural way, and that's again just a part of your own consciousness going through its evolutions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, like even thinking of my transitions and throughout my life, I'm trained as a massage therapist, and it's definitely muscle pain. I mean, I can feel, as far as according to the body, it is definitely a muscle thing, and it's not that big of a problem, not that big of a deal, but at the same time, what becomes muscles, and what becomes muscle pain. And even though this is an intellectual kind of stabbing at it, there is that definitely, as far as now, my mind initially determines the reality, thinks of it as this energetic form. And that's why I'm like, as I was struggling and trying to put it into words, I'm like, I guess it's back pain. It was, mostly because I was originally and continuing to think about how it has to do with the frequencies. And it's quite literally in between, what some would say is the solar plexus and the heart. And I can feel it on the left side. So to get even more specific, it definitely has to do with my emotional reactions to the confidence of my expression of love and my expression of compassion. And I've noticed it's more about how I'm dealing with my relationship with my wife right now, and that we have this brand new baby, and it's kind of, it's still in the field where we can't really join physically yet. So I like have this emotional barrier up, and then I can identify that that's almost exactly what is manifesting there, and that I'm deliberately choosing to close that whole, you know, we're closed for service right now. We just had a baby, and and I think I'm, starting to crave it and starting to want, this emotional attention, and to give it, and that experience that, even sexually and everything with my wife. So as we've been going through this period of respite with the baby and everything.
Well, it's interesting, and it makes sense. There's definitely a sense of loss or a sense of something missing in your life, and that definitely can create the illusion of separation. And of course, as soon as the mind has that thought, then it gets active and starts to put it into terms that are more visible, uh, more of a feeling experience within the body. But ultimately, this is a cycle here where it sounds like the more you are affirming that you have a connection with your wife on a much higher plateau, on the strictly spirit level, and seeking, as Course in Miracles says, the full experience of the holy relationship, and recognizing the presence of the Christ within that. I would say that that next step is ground that you are kind of calling upon yourself to gain, to take another step to a little bit higher plateau and see the relationship as a more complete synthesis within the mind, as occurring within the mind, and as being one of a complete union where the two of you really get a kind of a zone there where you lose a sense of self within the relationship and recognize the oneness of that sacred relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree that, as it seems, as we're putting it into words and these terms and everything, it's tricky. It's just like in a dream, you're talking to somebody and they seem like they're separate from you, and you're talking about your story or whatever, and you don't even really remember it, but you're talking about it in the sleeping dream, and then you recognize as that lucid dreamer recognizes it's dreaming, and just the whole dreamer perspective outside of that recognizes that it's all in that mind, and it's just like these, there's no real persons, even as myself, that are something that outside of a dream, and so the story and the images of this person is just this fluid artwork, kind of an idea of just the movement of whatever it is, physical or spiritual, doesn't matter. It's just kind of this continual change, but it is always within that dreamer's mind. And as much as I might be in the position of that image dreamt of, especially currently, it really doesn't change, the fact of that consciousness that is dreaming, and that it is in complete awareness and choosing of its what it's doing and what. So in other words, I would say that it's not as if I'm suffering over here. I was bringing up something new, and it was more of the realization or of having a topic that, while it might be deemed as something, I don't know, less holy or less perspective or something, really, it's just something to talk about. And a lot of people seem to relate with this idea that they have pain and suffering and hardships and stuff, and don't recognize it as quite literally firsthand experience of a decision made. And we like to make a decision and completely forget that we made a decision, and then live it as if it's happening to us and not by us.
Yeah, that is one of the unfortunate things about getting, trapped in the dream, because I see a lot of that on social media where people are um, posting on a daily or weekly basis. Oh my God, this is happening to me, and oh my God, that is happening to me, and I had to drag myself down to the doctor's office or over to the hospital. And these things show up in a lot of different formats, but again, they what they're doing is they're showing us a sense of resistance. We are pushing, trying to escape some thoughts that we believed were temporarily real. So it's hard to explain that to people who are struggling and just beginning to recognize that everything that's going on in the world around them is something they have created. So, the desire to be a victim, which of course is what stems from the depths of the ego. The ego is always a victim. Becomes an avenue that people they have to recognize that they are on that journey, that they are um, gifted with the power to alter that. But, are they going to actually stop and address the fact that they are the ones who are making this happen? And it does get caught up in that flow, like the dream state, as you said. As you go deeper and deeper into the dream, you become less and less aware of the fact that you are the one who is projecting the dream. So even though there is only one of us, that oneness is populated by an infinite number of the one us. And we do have the option of, resisting and stepping outside the oneness for a period of time. But ultimately, that is a self-inflicted wound, that is a self-inflicted illness or discomfort or disease or, a lack on one level or another. So it does become a fascinating enigma when you're just stepping back and watching it from the outside. But when you're in the midst of it, it can really turn into kind of a real dog and pony show where you're allowing the ego to just have one ongoing orgasm after another.
Yeah, it's really tricky. I mean, this whole life. I mean, it's part of the fun, though. It's part of the fun, being an ultimate, all-knowing creator of universes. You know, having the ability to do anything and everything you want to do. I know, why is, you know, being a suppressed little tiny self such a problem? It's, you know, if you don't want to do it, you know, if you don't like pain and you don't like suffering, then of course, yeah, you stop doing it. But if you like it, you know, if you recognize that the whole reason you're doing it is there's a part of a thrill going on, there's something that you're actually enjoying about it. But you do have to get into that perspective, you know, above the battleground, to recognize, why on earth would I enjoy suffering and pain? And it does, you know, you it does take that initial step of willingness to see things differently, and to see that there is actually a different consciousness about yourself. There is actually something greater than everything you think of yourself to be. And yet, even that little decision, as I could say that to someone new, if they're not given those eyes to see or those ears to hear, in that created aspect of themselves, if they're not here to represent that existence, then it's almost impossible for them to break free of that. But the truth about them, you know, is what is doing that, is what is designing that. And I would say, go as far as to say that the truth about myself is designing that, and designing that situation with them, for them, as them. I'm sure
Yeah,
you.
that's definitely a fact. And one of the things that comes up around that is the voice of the ego, which is so constant when you're allowing yourself to reside in the ego, is giving us this idea that if we stop being our little ego self, that we are going to pop into oblivion, that we will cease to exist. And of course, that's 100% accurate from the ego's vantage point, because the ego really isn't real and it never has existed. But we have allowed ourselves to entertain it for a period of time. But the truth is that if you can take that journey into stillness and just stop the ego's continuity stream, the ego is always making noise, is always saying this and that, and always doing things. And that's what keeps the ego in place in your mind. And if you can disrupt that every once in a while by entering into silence just for a brief second, you'll discover that you come back and nothing really has changed as far as your sense of ego self, but that frequently issues that you've been working on, problems that you have had, are starting to morph into a different situation. And every little bit of the immersion in that pool of spirit, in that ocean of love, does heal your misunderstandings about yourself. And really, that's what the core of all of our problems are. If you reduce it down to the most fundamental level, it's a misunderstanding of who you are that causes every issue that you're experiencing in life. So you really have to be willing to take that leap of faith. I mean, it's all based on trust. And that is the foundation of all spiritual growth, is having enough trust to believe that you are beyond the body and that you are beyond this somewhat warped sense of self. And as soon as you're able to step out of that and begin to just, experience life as a state of flow, as a state of truth, or as a state of Christ consciousness or Buddha mind or whatever, all of a sudden things will start turning around, and you will start to see a light at the end of the tunnel of your own ego identity.
Yeah, and on my journey, as far as my journey has been, being trained as a massage therapist, that's when things started changing for me. I started studying the body. I started getting all detailed about what the body's concerns are, and getting massages every day is awesome. And it's getting very detailed into the body. It was beautiful. I felt like, I achieved somewhat of a mastery of the body, and it entered into, that's when I discovered energy work. There was also classes on acupressure and reflexology and such, and that someone mentioned Reiki, and I started going into this whole asking about this Reiki. I had no idea what this was, and this was kind of before the whole internet for me, and before I even knew how to look stuff up. And it started entering into this world of a whole spiritual practice, the movement of energy and the use of the movement, and going into meditation. And I highly suggest this Vipassana meditation that I also started getting into. And I feel like I came to somewhat of a satisfactory level, wouldn't necessarily say mastery, of the energy work and the spiritual universe. And as far as that experience of it, I mean, seeing auras and experiencing it, and recognizing its frequencies. And then that exceeded a point to where, okay, I got the body, I got the soul. Now what? And that's when I found A Course in Miracles, and it started opening up into this realm of now it's not about this, extension or effect or expression of the self, or what's it called, projection of the self, even as the physical body. But it opened up this world of recognizing that the reality of consciousness is, whatever it sees itself. And it kind of flipped that whole thing on me, kind of flipped just the whole experience. Instead of seeing things that I'm, studying and working through and talking with and everything, now all of a sudden, it's all myself. And the whole reason, you can go into any experience and actually have an experience and perceptually recognize that this experience is happening, whether it be physical or spiritual. It definitely is a reflection of what my own consciousness believes to be true. And so if I am not trained as far as this consciousness to see anything different than a physical world, and if I'm insistent that the physical world is the only truth, and that it is the only experience I will ever have, then I am not showing that willingness, that little diligence to actually experience furthermore of that consciousness experience. And it's not so much that the consciousness has an actual image about it, or a perception of it, but you recognize when that flips over, that everything you experience in the spiritual world or in the physical world remains to be all within that consciousness, within that mind. I think that's kind of what you were saying a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. And, the big thing is to recognize that you're seeing the world through your personal perceptual level of thought. And so that's why people will come along who think and do and act in ways that you find incomprehensible. And that, of course, is a big part of what keeps the ego in place. That is fodder for the ego. It loves to have a big, glorious dining hall kind of banquet every day on based on that idea that this person is nuts, that person's off their rocker, and the person down the street from me is evil, and World War III is erupting. And so that's why one of the things about A Course in Miracles that I think is really solid and grounding and beneficial is getting back to that idea that you have to forgive the world, because the world is entirely your creation. And so everybody that populates it, whether they appear as friend or foe, in actual fact is a projection of your beliefs and your fears and your experiences in this mortal life. And so the beginning of resolution is to look at somebody that you have had an interaction with, and you walked away from the situation saying, well, that jerk doesn't have the brains God gave a baby grand piano. And you have to get a little bit of distance there. And as you continue to work on the forgiveness level of transcending that individual's appearance of who they are and asking for assistance from the Holy Spirit in seeing the truth of that person, you will find that your perception of them appears to change them. And in reality, at all times, they have always been to Christ. But your perception turned them into the devil. And as your perception changes, you will see them increasingly becoming the Christ. And when I say this to people, especially who are very political people, it's like, well, I could never see Donald Trump as being the Christ. And I say, well, that's strictly your journey. That is your elected stance. If you change that stance, you will see who the truth of Donald Trump is. So, it gets to be it gets to be a source of discomfort very, very rapidly for people when they start to take on ownership of their experiences with people and their experiences with the world around them. Because when you reduce it down to its foundation, nothing here can happen without your giving it permission to happen. And that's really a challenging idea for a lot of people.
Kind of opens up another realm of political parties. It's not actually the political parties so much as it actually is this, are you in the ego party or in the Christ party? And then there's these branches off of those parties where there's the Christ Jesus party, and then there's the internal Christ party, which they don't agree with each other. And then there's branches off of the several different ego parties. There's Republican, there's Democrat, there's all these different things. It takes into consideration, what is happening into form and what is and would be best for my body's survival or my children's body's survival. And so it goes down this whole world of attempting to not only find the best solutions to solve all these supposed problems, which are very evident to it, it doesn't even recognize or identify that there is actual a whole nother stance, a whole nother position of saying this Christ party, this Christ sonship, I guess a better word would be, of just completely above that whole battleground of Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Tea Party, whatever. It's, that, yeah, of course, in form, there would be different things to agree with, and there would be better ways about physical world. There would be better ways about it all. But this isn't like the explanation of that. This isn't actually saying, don't make decisions anymore in the physical world. This is saying and recognizing everything, every motivation that you have within you coming through you is a decision made, and this goes with everyone, that everything happening in in the world is all from that decision maker, that Christ consciousness that is deliberately choosing this entirety of this experience, and being that omniscient presence of everything. And of course, it seems debatable as if this is even true or even possible or anything. But until as us and as many people have had unexplainable, undefinable experiences, they open their mind, to other understandings and other possibilities, and and only then would they seek for answers. It's like, oh, this doesn't quite fit into my paradigm of existence, my laws of physics. Something weird happened, and now you need to either think you're insane and just deny it and say it never actually happened, or you can try and understand it. Some of us have that, craving to that tiny little experience. I could have sworn I was outside of my body for that moment. It's like, I want to understand it. I want to try and do it again to see if it's true. I want to, actually go into that experience and emphasize it and see if it can be, utilized or something. And that's when someone starts opening up their mind to other possible universes and other possible variations and laws of the universe, and things, and just the world opens up when you open up. It's pretty cool.
Yes, it's very exhilarating when you actually experience it, and that deepest level. And yes, you can definitely hear Loki, the 115-pound German Shepherd in the background, trying to.
It's a big dog.
Yeah, he wants to eat the postman, and of course, can't go.
I like the natural sounds and effects.
Yeah, it definitely adds a little extra juice to the conversation, but nonetheless, within that, I had an experience that really clarified in my mind what was going on in this material realm. In that, I had known of a restaurant up in a rural area, recreational area, and had eaten there many, many, many years ago, back in the 70s, on more than one occasion. And then I had gone up there and seen the restaurant through my eyes. I had witnessed it in the 80s and again in the 90s. And then in 2013, I had this experience where I appeared to die and come back to life, and I was on a respirator for 6.5 days, and there was no brain activity, and the doctors had all said, well, just unplug him because he's a vegetable now. And nonetheless, I did come back out of that morass, that pit that I had fallen into for a while. And so then the family and I went up to that area, and all of a sudden, things I recognized that things in the physical world had shifted, because the restaurant was about 3 miles out of town. It was painted a bright red, and it had white trim. And when we went there back in 2014, the signs all pointed to it being downtown. And we stopped at the restaurant because I wanted to have some fish. And the building, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense, because the building was a moss green with kind of a yellowish trim on it. And we went in and sat down and started to order. And I said, well, when did you move the restaurant? To the waitress. And she says, oh, it's been here for 35 or more years. And I said, oh, really? That's quite astonishing. So we do have those periods that seem like, you lost your mind somewhere along the river of time. And when you re-entered the river of time, everything had been subtly tweaked. And, there are movies made about that. There are plots about that in books. But the reason there are is because that is a part of the dream world that we exist in. So if you pop out of the dream for a brief period of time, you come back in, it's a very good likelihood that you are going to see some minor differences. And now for me, it was major, but there are subtle things that you notice all the time, where there's something that shifted, something that it was like a stitch out of time, as they say. And you set your car keys down on the kitchen table, and you get ready to leave, and you search throughout the house and find them on the nightstand in your bedroom. It's like, how the hell did that happen?
Well, that one is definitely because of the leprechauns. So
yes, and again, the leprechauns are in your mind. So you have to accommodate them. Make sure that your leprechauns are happy, or they're going to make you suffer. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, we lost. My wife's keys disappeared a couple weeks ago, and we're still looking. We need to put out a plate of gold and see if we can lure those leprechauns back. Say, you want this instead? Oh yeah, I love that that when you become more aware of your mind and more aware of what's happening around you and those things that you are seeing, and especially when you identify them with actual aspects of your own consciousness, you have the ability to notice those subtle changes, and it's really it's shifting alternate universes, and you're actually moving between different timelines of existence. And I noticed it a lot, mostly the first time I got upset at I guess it was my second girlfriend. I got really upset in the car just all of a sudden. I don't know what. I don't remember why. And I called her a bitch, and I hit the steering wheel. And what was a position of no cars in front of me, all of a sudden there was tons of cars in front of me. And one would say, well, you just obviously were distracted and weren't aware of all those cars and didn't stop, which just like any of these, we can all put it on some psychological thing. Well, you had brain damage, and you're remembering it completely wrong, and all this stuff, wrong, all these ideas that of course make the mind responsible of there's that part of you that's aware of something, and you're like, oh, I could have sworn it was a little different, a little different here, a little different there. And so we had a car accident, and just slammed right into the cars that were stopped at that light for the last 5 minutes or something. And I really questioned it. It's like I could have sworn there was no cars there, and I really don't know for sure, but it was what it came down to, and how spirit has described it to me, which now I'm becoming almost continuously aware of, these shifting between timelines, quite literally, to an alternate universe, that I made that emotional and use that emotional change, that emotional power to quite literally shift into a position where there were cars stopped there for 5 minutes or whatever it was, in from a universe where they were already driving, where they were not there, and so actually had that experience, like a teleportation between universes that almost happens continuously in our lives. As you know, and I'm putting it into terms, it really is simply a decision. You know, when every time we make a decision, we're determining what we want our universe to be like, you know, what we want the world to be like. And to say, even to make it a little more comprehensible, these different timelines are stacked, you know, one being higher, one being lower, kind of an idea. And you're going to ultimate high frequency of spiritual nature of the universe, from this lower aspect where it's, you know, low frequencies. And every time you make a positive decision, you're going one way. When you're making a negative decision, you're going another way. That's just one way of understanding it. It's a far more complex than that, but it is, it's quite literally as your mind training your consciousness to perceive the world a peaceful place. You know, it has to change. It's required to change. If and so it's not like, you know, I need to move all those cars and change the situation, change the world around me. I need to change my mind about the world, and it naturally changes. And yeah, and through that awareness, you know, you don't have to be aware of it. You can simply enjoy the ride, as most of us really are doing.
Yeah, that's very, very much a thing of dialogue, discussion right now in a lot of regions of both the metaphysical as well as the scientific communities, because
Oh, yeah.
we are beginning to recognize that reality is very much a subjective phenomenon. You know, it is not uh, a static situation that we exist in. It is a very fluid process that we create as we're moving forward on the line of time. And so we create our surroundings, we create our reality. And then again, it goes back to that idea of denial. You know, are you willing to accept the fact that you have created this? And then are you, you know, part two, willing to uncreate it for something that is an alternate reality that is much more pleasant to exist in? So it just goes on and on and on. But we've got the validation, we've got the bounce back from people all around us. We've got, you know, the entire planet reflecting back to us the fact that everything the ego is proclaiming to be real and true is generally pretty warped. And
We design this universe that way, you know, and it's kind of just the parameters of the existence, even if it is just momentarily. You know, we just simply want to go on that journey of that, you know, oh, everything's going to tell you how you don't exist, or the reality of you don't exist, and we're going to make it seem like the reality of you is outside of yourself, and therefore now can be proven to not be there. You know, this omniscient presence, this creator of universes and worlds, and that, you know, it make it almost impossible labyrinth. Just this journey. I mean, we know by, because we've existed for eternity. We know that we got eternity here in any way we want to. So let's try, you know, set up these laws and this way of looking that is next to impossible to see beyond, unless we actually recognized the reality of who we are, you know, unless we actually recognize the truth of that omniscient self. Could we actually, you know, exceed it and experience that beyond that world?
yeah, it really is a thing of surrendering, and you can surrender in both directions. That's a nice thing about the dualistic universe we inhabit. You can surrender to spirit and have a much more comfortable experience, or you can surrender to the ego and oh my goodness, all of the different outpourings of madness that comes from that, going in that direction, becomes an immediate problem. It's like, well, you know, if you are out in the desert and it's 130 degrees and you have a flat tire and no water, I wonder how that happened. And of course, the ego has all these different reasons for it happening. There was a leak in the gas tank, you know, this circumstance and that circumstance, and it all comes back to victimhood. But when you surrender to spirit, all of a sudden, you know, you do have that bounce between parallel realities. And all of a sudden, oh my goodness, here in the trunk of the car, we have, you know, a couple of bottles of water, and gee, there's a hand pump. We can fill the tire with air and at least, you know, get into town and get out of the sun. So the truth of your life is basically what do you want it to be? If you want it to be a life of peace and harmony, you have that power to make it that way. If you want struggle and angst and fear and frustration, then dive deeply into the pool of ego, because that will be the guaranteed outcome.
Yeah, you might as well enjoy it then, you know. It's like you can enjoy a life of pleasure and joy over here, or you can have this idea of pain and suffering and angst and all that good stuff, but you can enjoy that too, you know. You can enjoy that stuff. You just have to recognize, you know, that you're something transcendent to each experience, to all experiences, and that you're this observer of who you are. You're not actually who you are. You're just this perceiver and chooser of eternal essence and existence. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Well, you know, one feather, I might have to cut us a little short today. We got started a little late. I have to get on ACIM Gather in just a few minutes. I really should just set this up with you to do our show on ACIM Gather Friday mornings. I don't know why I had decided to do it beforehand, but yeah. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, it definitely could be a workable solution. So we'll have to have some dialogue about that. But overall, it was a great conversation today. Hopefully, there will be little pivots in here in the dialogue that will hit the spot for somebody who is struggling with something and looking for an answer. And you know, the YouTube channel that I am recording these on, if you subscribe to the channel, that would be very cool. Then you'll be notified when we're doing something. And number two, if you have thoughts or questions or whatever, Devin and I are both very accessible. So email us, leave posts for us on social media, and we will respond.
Sounds good. Thank you for being here, and thank you all for tuning in.
Talk to you later.
Have a beautiful day.